And we're live. Ladies and gents, welcome back to a special Tuesday broadcast. This doesn't happen very often. But Jeff Evely called me up and said, "Hey, you want to chat? I got some stuff to chat about." And I said, "Hell yeah, let's do this." Jeff, you brought it up last night. You said we're going to talk about the elderly benefits that are out there for Canadians. Let's just call it that, I guess. But you got old age security in Canada, and this is different from pension plans. This is different from your CP, your Canadian pension plan, contributions or whatever pension you might have with your job. This is like the end of the road. This is when you just can't make it for yourself. They give you this, right? Am I getting that wrong? Isn't that how it was supposed to be laid out?
In terms of the OAS, well, okay, so the thing is that out of 23 OECD countries that were examined by the Fraser Institute in a report they published in 2022, 16 of them have already raised the age of eligibility for OAS. Canada is one of the outliers. We maintain it at 65, and you can get CPP at 60. And, that potentially leads to 25, 30 years worth of benefits. Whereas when these programs were first put in place, they were set at the age of life expectancy. So, and other countries, actually other OECD countries, some have just raised the age, and a few of them have actually indexed it to life expectancy. So we have like this massive, basically deficit. Unfunded liabilities is what we're talking about when we're talking about like social programs. We have these massive unfunded liabilities because the boomer generation is retiring. And this is like the issue of our era, really, is the issue that we have the largest generation among us, the boomer generation, going into retirement, and they're cashing out these benefits for decades worth of retirement, which they were never set up to do. There has been some restructuring over the years, but it still is the case that these programs depend on things like GDP growth and population growth in particular. Now, in 2012, the Harper government reformed the plan to like OAS and I think CPP as well, to raise the age of eligibility to 67. And then, he got tossed out of office, and Trudeau repealed that. And so
isn't that a whole like talking point that the Liberals have, that
yes.
if you vote for the Conservatives, they'll put the age eligibility for pension plan up a few years. That's the big scare, right?
Yeah, it is the big scare, but it's what the countries that are not going bankrupt are doing. They're raising the retirement age because it's just not a feasible plan. And the Fraser Institute has a pretty good critique on the Canada pension plan, even. So it's not just OAS. A lot of people are talking about OAS, but the Canada pension plan has about $1 trillion in unfunded liabilities. When you use like the actual value of their liabilities, what they do with the Canada pension plan is they use projected values, and those projected values assume a constant population growth. So the alternative to raising the retirement age to 67 was mass immigration, and that's really like that's what the demand is all about. Is they have to bring in like 500,000 people a year just to keep these retirement plans solvent for the boomer generation in particular.
Okay, let's circle back to all of that, because let's start with the preface. Let's start with why did we think in the first place that this is what we needed? So we live in what we all thought was a free country. This is the idea. We all live, I grew up with the whole, like, somebody tells you what to do. You say, "You tell me what to do. It's a free country," right? And we slowly eroded our way away from this idea of like what a free country is. What does a free country mean? Liberty is the idea that you not only have freedoms to do things, but you also have the responsibility to take care of yourself. And this is something that's been let's just say we've been moving away from that for a very long time. In the United States, they're dealing with that. It started with the New Deal. under who's that, FDR.
Yeah.
And the New Deal came with all of these new things where it was like guarantees for things that were never guarded under the Constitution. These are entitlements that were brought forward, and Canada kind of followed suit, as well as a lot of the other countries that you're naming in the OECD. So we came with these new social programs, the social safety net, as some people call it. And this is the idea that, well, those poor elderly, what happens if we have another Great Depression and all this stuff, right? And we got to take care of them because, life expectancy is about 65 years old. And what if they live beyond those years? They're not going to be expected to work until the day that they die, are they? And, these are all the thoughts. These are nice thoughts that came from people that had no other giant responsibilities like this at the time. So they brought about these social programs, and which ended up becoming these entitlements. And as you alluded to, the age expectancy does not match where the life expectancy is today.
Yeah,
we live much longer, but people are able to retire at such an early age relative to that. And that comes with a lot of problems. And a lot of economists have been saying for many, many years that, well, as the expectancy, age, or, life expectancy goes up, so should the retirement age. These are unfunded liabilities. If you want to retire early, you could do that on your own dime. Have at her. Congratulations. I'm glad you did well in your life. But apart from that, it's like, well, we can't run what I like to call a Ponzi scheme at the end of the day.
It is. It is, and functionally speaking, like it's enslaving the unborn. We hand a bill to Canadians for being born nowadays. In terms of these unfunded liabilities, younger generations are not going to get anywhere near the return on their contributions. And another one of these, another thing that they depend on is like an inflation rate of about 2.1%. So, how much can we depend on these factors for younger generations? Now, they say that they're able to cover these unfunded liabilities out until like 2070 or something like that. But again, it depends on these
that date keeps moving, though, Jeff. It keeps moving. I remember as a teenager hearing that the date was going to be in the 2010s. And it keeps going out further and further where the unfunded liability point is. And let's just face it, we had a drunken sailor in Parliament for 10 years. And he did what drunken sailors do, and he spent all the money, even money that we don't have today. So at what point does it kind of rein in? And like I said, we've seen this coming for a very long time. They knew that the baby boomer generation will be retiring, and that when that comes about, we're going to hit a fiscal wall. It's just going to be unbelievably unsustainable. We won't be able to pay the bills. But now we're seeing that, but we're seeing record numbers of spending money. Like, it's just unbelievable. There's the amount that they still continue to spend.
It's theft. I mean, they are enslaving the younger generations. It's outrageous what's happening. The younger people like Gen Z, Generation Screwed, they're going to spend their entire lives just working to pay for the boomers' retirements. Functionally speaking, like, they're never going to own property. They're barely going to be able to afford rent. They're going to have to share housing or live with their parents, and just work for nothing. They're never going to be able to accumulate wealth because all of that wealth has been transferred to the boomer generation. Functionally speaking.
There's a similar situation happening in China right now, because
Yes.
people just can't get off their feet. Young men are in a situation culturally, you can't have a girlfriend unless you have a piece of property. So people are buying condos in like ghost towns that banksters are making lots of money on, because they're building these condos for pennies on the dollar, and then they're charging people to own it just so that they have a deed so they could get a girlfriend. And then on top of that, they can't even live in the towns that they live in, or they can't afford to, and they live there and have to work there. And there's a phenomena that's come about, and it's called the lie flat movement. I don't know if you've heard of this, where young people are just checking out and they're saying, you know what? I'm not gonna do all of that stuff. I'm not gonna bust my ass. I'm
No.
just gonna lie flat. I'm just gonna lay down and do nothing. How about that? And now they're becoming a draw on the system. And in fact, there was like YouTube videos of people talking about this concept. China has banned everything from the internet discussing this concept. But it's a cultural thing that you'll run into. It doesn't matter what country you're from. If you do this to a people, the economic incentives will send you in a direction where, for lack of a better word, productivity's at zero. I'm getting this from the chat right now. Productivity's zero. And
Yes.
that's almost the end. I know it's not a goal, but we all know, at least the people who pay attention to, the philosophy on this side of the aisle, is that when you introduce socialism, it it ends up eating itself in the end. And if you have a little bit, it just takes longer. If you have a lot, it's just quicker. It's just a degree of how much socialism you bring in, not if you do or don't. It's when you do, it's gonna end bad. It just may take a while, and
Yeah.
that's where we're at. It's kind of like that, and I can't help but feel bad for boomers as well that have been sold a lie.
I don't know. I have a hard time feeling bad for them. It seems like they're making off like bandits. And I mean, they have been the ones running our institutions since 2020. It's called a fourth turning, by the way. It's a global phenomenon. It's a demographic crisis that occurs every 4 generations. And it's always when the generation born in the wake of the previous crisis, World War II, American Civil War, American Revolution, and so on, when that generation reaches peak institutional power in their early elderhood, just prior to retirement, when they're at the peaks of their careers, everything kind of falls apart, and we get all this tyranny and madness. Even the narrowing of the gender roles is a constituent of the fourth turning. Happens about every 88 years, and
That's
now
normal. That happens every time.
Yep, yep. Like the first biomedical gender transition was performed in 1933, I think, by Magnus Hirschfeld in the Weimar Republic. So that was another thing that took place like in the lead up to World War II. And like, if you've ever seen Gangs of New York, the lead up to the American Civil War, there were like lady boys and stuff like this that you would see out at the pub.
Does that mean Thailand's about to break down? No, I'm kidding.
But
I'm
and
kidding.
the population collapse component of it is a big one. It's like this inverted population pyramid, and you see the same demographic crisis in China and Russia, like everywhere in the world. This has been going on since we were hunter gatherers, the Chinese and the Russians have basically decided that they're going out Chinese and Russian because they don't really allow immigration the way that we do. That's for sure. So like it's basically the case that the last generation of Russians has already been born, and we're looking at population collapse in the early 2030s for China. They're headed for like multiple cliffs, not just the fiscal cliff, but the population one as well. And yeah, we're under attack by China right now in World War III. It just looks much different. It's very clandestine. But if we can just kind of weather the storm and hold out, like they're going to collapse on their own anyway. So there's that to look forward to. But not
So
before
I've said this before. Like I'm not as concerned about the United States, because the United States has had the Great Depression. They've had all currency collapses before, Civil War, all of that, and have come back stronger than ever. I see the only crux to the United States ever having a true collapse is if liberty was lost, because it's liberty that is the selling feature of that whole system. As long as you have liberty, you're going to have prosperity very quickly after.
Yes. Like if you just leave people alone and let them pursue their own interests and their own incentives, then you're going to get a lot more out of them. The most productive countries are always the most liberal in the classical sense.
Free.
Yeah, free, exactly. Right now the United States is probably better than any in those terms. So I fully expect that, yeah, they're going to really take off in the next several years. And by the time we get to 2030, like, it's going to be a new dawn of the Enlightenment. But Canada, on the other hand, I don't know.
It's funny. I tweeted this out today, and I'm paraphrasing myself, but I said when it all collapses and they can't pay people's pensions, is that when the boomers will warm up to the 51st state?
I don't know, but I mean, Alberta is headed towards separation early next year. I wouldn't be the least bit surprised if Saskatchewan moved in that direction as well. And then where's that going to leave us? So we might end up getting absorbed whether we like it or not. So it's either them or China. And I think that's essentially the game that Trump is playing. Like, he sees what's happening in Canada and how China has set up shop here and co-opted our elites, and they're using our territory as a staging ground to launch hybrid warfare attacks into the United States, and driving us toward collapse, as per the art of war since the 5th century of BC. The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without any fighting.
Right.
Yeah. So it's
speaking of not any fighting. So the reason why I was getting at that, I'm not concerned about boomers in Alberta. I think boomers in Alberta are on the same page as we are right now.
Probably,
I'm talking about I don't know, this guy. We all know this guy. The famous boomers that got Carney elected. Obviously, when I say boomers, folks in the chat, I'm talking about particular people, not all hashtag not all, I guess you say. we're talking about the boomers that got Carney elected, the ones that wiffle waffle on the ideas of liberty, that are like, wait a second, I got to make sure I got my thing going for me, then everybody can have their liberty, then everybody can have sound government, as long as I got my entitlements. And the Bradford boomer is the personification of that, absolutely. And well, you know what, let's just get into it, because this is interesting. The National Post just posted an article about this, and this is what I covered in this morning's video talking about this. This was where it went. So we went from the Liberals actually absolutely saying, just as of the end of summer, said, after a lifetime of building this country, Canadian seniors deserve to retire with dignity. The next OAS and CPP payments are going out, and we'll keep working to protect the financial security that they've earned. And then a couple of months later, they're urged to cut old age security spending in the upcoming budget. Now, they're not touching the money that's going to Ukraine. They're not touching the money that's destined to teach people in Sri Lanka not to poop on beaches, or whatever the things are, right? I predicted this a while ago. I said, when it comes to brass taxes, they're gonna cut you off first. Like, they're gonna throw you under the bus. But anyway, it's this guy named Kershaw, and so advocates are calling for the Carney Liberals to start with the biggest line item when deciding where to cut spending ahead of the upcoming federal budget. Paul Kershaw, this is this guy, and we'll get into who he is, the head of the generational fairness group called Generation Squeeze, told reporters in Ottawa that the $80 billion old age security program desperately needs to be reined in, with federal spending hurling towards a crisis point. Now, what it does point out, and what a lot of people are discussing right now, is the fact that there are so many people that are taking absolute advantage of this. Now, there are people that this is what they're getting, and that's basically all they've got for income. And you know, that sucks. And I feel for those people when you've been promised all of the world and then you come to age and you're, you know, you're sore and you can't work and all they give you is a couple $100 and it barely makes rent. I'm not talking about those people. There's a whole group of people that have their, you know, pension from Chrysler or pension from wherever, you know, the golden gander, and yet they're
But
still collecting this. They're collecting
yeah,
old
there are
age security.
millionaires. There are millionaires
Yeah.
collecting OAS. It's there's a lot of greed, and you know, it just has to be said that yes, I would expect that from the boomers, and that yeah, you know, but I would encourage you to read Bruce Gibney's work, A Generation of Sociopaths, how the baby boomers betrayed America. Very alarming trends within this generation. And they, you know, Neil Howe forecasted that when they reach peak institutional power in the year 2020, plus or minus 2 years, he said that in 1991, that, you know, everything would fall apart. And things like Pierre Poilievre's right to call out the RCMP for, and he said it was the senior brass. It is the senior brass. It's people like Brenda Lucki and Mike Duhame who, you know, said they should bring in some more laws to ban Invictus against Canadians. Like, they're tyrants, and they're just not capable of doing their jobs. So they lash out at us. And this is what's been going on in Canada's military since the early 90s, because they have a lower retirement age and a higher rate of attrition. They reach peak institutional power there first, and we got the Somalia affair. And I mean, it's the Somalia affair just on a global scale, where it's, you know, sweep everything under the rug, just like they tried to do with that.
Explain to me what's the Somali affair? What happened there?
So that was when the airborne regiment deployed to Somalia on a peacekeeping mission and ended up using the starving peasant Somalian children they were sent to help as for target practice. The Colonel Matthew ordered his troops to, quote, shoot between the skirts and the flip-flops as they were running away, because they were stealing food and provisions from the camp. So, I mean, they could have secured the perimeter, but what they ended up doing is putting food and provisions in a sea can at the end of the compound as bait to lure in some of those peasant kids so they could shoot them while they were running away. And they caught one kid in a neighboring compound in a, he was 16, Ariel Sharon, and they caught him in a porta-john and accused him, I guess, of trying to steal the porta-john or something, and ended up torturing him to death. They put out cigarettes on his feet, probably raped him with a nightstick. And
This was Canadian troops. This took place.
Yes.
Holy hell.
Yeah. And, you know, a lot of people will probably point to the mefloquine factor too. That's fair. You know, mefloquine is...
What is that?
That's the anti-malarial that, you know, drives people crazy. We all have to take it when we deploy, but apparently it makes us crazy.
Did it make you crazy?
Well, I mean, my generation was in Afghanistan for 13 years. How many kids did we rape, torture, and kill?
Yeah,
So,
well, none that I've ever heard of.
Exactly. And the Americans had the same problem in Vietnam with the massacre of My Lai, where they shot babies strong enough to crawl from under their raped mothers, who died shielding them from the boomers' bullets. Like, absolutely chilling stuff. Read about it sometime. I bet you your blood will curl.
Oh man.
Yeah. So, and you know, every serial killer in living memory, they used to be 35 to 45, like when it was late 70s, early 80s, when they first started kind of coming around. But
so, you can't add it out. You're telling me that all the serial killers are boomers?
Name one. They're all born. Yes.
Man. You know, I'm not gonna hear the end of this. You're gonna ride off into the sunset. And I have so many boomers in my audience, and they lose their mind if you bring up boomers. And I've said stuff that's not even that.
It is a certain class, like you said,
Yeah.
And I believe you're pretty on the money there when you say, like, the Alberta boomers are probably with us, but the cosmopolitan elites in particular, it's this generation of elites that we have the problem with, and this is a recurring theme every time we overcome these crisis eras. we raise children as indulged. In this case, it was permissive parenting by Dr. Benjamin Spock. I forget the name of the title of the book. It's childcare and something, but this style of parenting was known as permissive, and it's indulgent is what it is. So it's kind of the beaver cleaver can do no wrong, but beaver cleaver grows up to be Ted Bundy is what ends up happening. So and why Bruce Canagibney started looking into this was because of Silicon Valley closing down, because of the censorship regime that started coming into YouTube in the late 2000s and really the early 2010s in particular. And that was what he discovered, was that once the CEOs became boomers, when it was boomers who aged into the CEOs and the boards of directors, like the Twitter board of directors that didn't want to sell to Elon Musk even when the shareholders did. Mm-hmm. That's when Silicon Valley started closing down. And, he ended up going into a lot of detail in the statistics and stuff like that to really string together, I think, AIDS epidemic. Nobody else had one of those. So it's this kind of degeneracy, I think. And you see that all over the place right now, whether it's drugs or child trafficking or whatever. It's like Sodom and Gomorrah, right? These are these recurring crisis eras. That's essentially what the Bible is it's a catalog of fourth turnings. They happen every once a human lifetime, civilizational threatening crisis. So that's why we see these same themes recur, like all the Orwellianism and like the Book of Revelation. You'll notice a lot of the same kinds of trends, like people can really feel it. So, but that's what it is. It's once they take over, then we get Orwell's tyranny.
So I got an interesting chat here from Revisades, regular of the channel, for $10, says, this is in response to OAP and CCP. If they used a fund and actually fed it properly, would it be all that bad? We don't have a fund backing it since Chrétien backed the budget. In fact, what is that? Barbecued the budget. So that's interesting, because I actually just heard this recently. The Chrétien government, the only reason they ever balanced the budget is because they saw that as like a voter's issue at the time, and they didn't want to lose government, so they just took funds from everywhere and just balanced the budget. And that was like, okay, let's make sure we don't get the cons in. But I wanted to bring up this idea, and I don't know, stop me if you think I'm wrong on this, but I think that just like cultural Marxism, where they use intersectionality, the idea that people's racial backgrounds, the color of their skin, all these other things, they use them as perceived inequities so that you can pit people against each other. Mm-hmm. And I see this being used much the same way. And I'm not saying that you're guilty of doing this. You're just pointing out facts. But what I see is organizations like Generation Squeeze. They're using this for the exact same thing, and it's disturbing. So this is the organization. Generation Squeeze is a charitable think and change tank. They're not just a think tank. They think and change, promoting well-being for all generations. See, we care. This is communist language. We're championing generations' fairness to preserve what Canadians hold sacred, because only we care about this: a healthy childhood, home, retirement, and planet, so we all have proud legacy. You can go to their solutions page, where you can look at the solutions that they have to offer, and I'll tell you, they don't really have any solutions. It's just more grievances. That's what the website has for you, just all kinds of grievances. But what's the result of this is basically the left latching onto this idea and using it as the next how to pit people against each other. In fact, they've already started this with this ad campaign that's not that new. This is from when Trudeau was still around.
the intergenerational contract is just so out of whack, and still older people think that they should have access to a whole load of universal benefits, but every other generation is mean tested. And I know you're talking to me about how do we do.
Weird. I don't know why that switched on me. This was actually a different video with Elizabeth May, and it disappeared. But either way, it was a video basically showcasing that we need to do something about this. The intergenerational gap is bigger than it's ever been, and it's all the fault of one side or the other. And, you know, let's get people angry at each other so that we can have more reasons to bring in more government. And it was basically showcasing Trudeau saying, it's never been this difficult to get a start in life, as if he had nothing to do with it.
I mean, yeah, this is something that multiple, like, successive governments for decades have failed to address. Really, I mean, I think Chrétien even commented on it, where they tried to bring in some reforms, and that there was some reformation of the Canada Pension Plan, but I don't think it's gone very well. The unfunded liabilities have gone up consistently since they reformed them in the 90s. So, like, it is a complete disaster. And yeah, I get what you're saying. I think about how you could kind of draw a Marxist line along this, but like, this is all just backed up by data, and there's that's all I'm talking about. Is just like hard data. Check out Neil Howe's series of books going from Generations in 1991, when he forecasted this crisis, to the Fourth Turning in 1997, when they realized that some of their predictions were already coming true. And then the Fourth Turning is here, just came out in, I think, 2022, and it does a summary of the rest of them before you get into it. So that's really important. It's all based on mountains of data from the Harvard Statistical Database. So it is just kind of the reality. This is a big part of the human story. That
I'm not doubting that once whatsoever. You're absolutely on point. What I'm concerned with, what I'm really concerned with, is how this turns into the next entitlement, and this is what I'm saying that they're aiming towards. So if you look up on YouTube Generation Squeeze, you get all these videos from them talking about proposing a housing wealth tax instead of income taxes, so we can tax the accumulated wealth of the baby boom generation and give that to the younger generations. It's more just like income distribution schemes that are riding on the backs of this conflict, this issue, because this is a genuine and legitimate issue. But there are a lot of people in there that are trying to turn this into another entitlements game, because this is how you gain power over people, is give them freebies, right?
Yeah, I mean, what is the answer though? Like, housing prices have to come down so the kids can buy houses. So we would have to build, like, they're still bringing in millions of immigrants, for crying out loud. They're bringing in way more people than they are building houses. There's absolutely no way we're going to be able to do this as long as we keep bringing in hordes of people from the developing world, obviously. And
here's the stats for that right there. I got this is crazy. So if you can't read it on the screen, folks, it says net international migration from 1952 to 2025, and it just forever was like not even really that much of an increase. In fact, it just kind of held steady, different changes and fluctuation over the years. But like right after 2020, it shot through the. It looks like an Al Gore graph. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
but it's insane that, like, the numbers are just.
Yeah, in the middle of the pandemic, while we were locked down, immigration takes right off.
And this is one of those things, right, where, like, I see it as politicians, because hear me out. So there was an argument this was an actual argument for monarchies. And I know you love philosophy and the idea of, like, different forms of governance. And one of the arguments from people who preferred monarchy to I don't know, democratically elected governments or self-governance. They said that when you have a democratically elected government and terms, that these people are transient and they only care about the immediate time that they're in power, and they don't have equity in the country as a whole. So therefore, a king would be better. And I'm not arguing this because I don't like kings, but the argument was that these politicians are much more or much less in tune with taking care of the country as a whole. They only want to kick the can down the road far enough that when they're out of power, the next guy gets to deal with the crisis, right? So if we set up a social safety net that's a Ponzi scheme that will eventually, inevitably crumble on itself because it just is unsustainable, and we have issues like we always have, we'll always have the issue that when you live in an affluent society, populations collapse. That just seems to be a human issue. But their Ponzi scheme works on 4% interest, or 4% increase in population, increase in GDP, 4%. That's the magic number, right? All across the board. Well, if you can't get that because the population's declining, what do? You kick the can down the road and you invite a bunch of people in. Oh, it's more taxpayers, right? But the reality is we're not getting more doctors and nurses and all that stuff. And in fact, all they've been doing is lowering the standard for people that come in the country because it was slowing down. So when they lower the standard, we get more Uber drivers and Tim Hortons clerks and all these other things that we don't need more of. Companies want more of because they want more cheap labor. But it's created more problems. So it seems like the thing that they're trying to do to kick the can down the road so it's the next politician that deals with it is actually exacerbating the situation entirely.
It's a real mess. What are we supposed to do? And you know, like I was saying, when it comes to the housing, like we're not going to be able to build enough. You were talking about taxing home equity. If we can't build enough, then
I don't want to do that. I think that's absurd. I think that taxing home equity. I don't even know though.
I'm open to that idea. It's not supposed to be the case that you get to be a millionaire for putting a roof over your head either. I mean, that's like brushing your teeth. You don't get to be a millionaire for brushing your teeth your whole life. It's absurd. And really, I mean, like the reason this is happening is because the boomers didn't have enough kids to support them while they were old, and they didn't build any homes for the new people coming on the scene. All of a sudden, nobody was interested in growing the middle class. Like once the boomers moved into it, and that middle class housing that they bought, you know, when for the price of a sea can in their day, they like that is now. That stuff that used to cost like 1 year to 2 year worth of the median income in Canada for a house is now like 10 times the median income in Canada. Like, and it's entirely because of those supply and demand forces where they didn't have enough kids, and then there was no paying it forward when it came to growing the middle class for future generations.
Now, I have a lot of gripes in the same direction. Now, when it comes, I mean, like, for example, when I was a young guy trying to get into the trades, all the boomers that were in the trades already were already mechanics. They all got grandfathered in. And in fact, they were the ones advocating for trade barriers and restrictions into the trades so that they would get paid better. Because it would create a shortage of that labor market. And so because of that, they never looked at the apprenticeship program that they put in place as like something that's that important. In fact, I was told like, whatever, I just got grandfathered in. Well, yeah, well, guess what? I have to jump through the hoops now. So sign the paperwork. And no, it turned into this thing where they saw it as a way of treating young people like dog shit, for lack of a better term, and say, oh, you dangle the carrot and then don't give it to you until you've done a whole bunch of work, or don't give it to you at all even after you've done a whole lot of breaking your back. And I've got my gripes about that stuff. But when it comes to the equity markets, or like talking about the housing boom, this big housing bubble, this, I mean, you can't say all boomers, but
no,
the financial sector in this case This is absolutely absurd that we're here. We've known about this phenomena for a very long time. The Austrian school, the Chicago School of Economics have all talked about this. How you get asset bubbles. What is the cause of asset bubbles? It's currency manipulation. When you manipulate currency, people you have to do it through printing of money, issuing new credit, new equity, or sorry, liquidity into the marketplace. And what does it do? It drives savings down, and it causes people to go into commodity markets, depending on what it is, and they bid prices up. It bids prices up artificially until that distortion goes away, and then afterwards pop and everybody's left holding the bag. We've known this is a thing for the longest time. So the whole reason why people's homes are such a big, you said it like all you got to do is brush your teeth and you're a millionaire. You're just living in a home that you purchase for whatever amount of money, and then you can just print money from the equity that the bank will give you loans for, that the value of your home happens to be at. You sit on those loans until you're dead, basically, and you pay them off very slowly, or you do this new financial thing that blows my mind. Reverse mortgages, where you're like, I'm not leaving anything to the next generation. I'm going to consume it all in the immediate. Reverse mortgages, you just take out money and then leave it to the bank. But that's all come about. And what do people think that's going to happen from that situation? Like, you cannot get blood from a stone. We are not alchemists, and we are not printing gold. We are printing dog shit, and that money that is going to come home to roost. And it seems like sooner than later, the housing market is really in bad shape. I have people that work in real estate calling me saying, you wouldn't believe it, but all the realtors in Vancouver are losing their shit right now. They are scared entirely that they're going to lose everything. This is not looking good. It started with the condo market, and now it's bleeding through. And now I'm getting messages saying, like, photographers are not working. People that do surveying and sightseeing are not working. That means the realtors are not hiring them, which means that things aren't moving.
Yeah. Well, and there's affordability crisis at the same time. So, the next generation can't even afford to heat and eat, let alone buy housing. And this is this is happening at the same time that a lot of people are trying to sell. A lot of the boomers will be trying to sell, and a lot of people moved during the pandemic. Like, tens of thousands of people moved during the pandemic, took new mortgages in 2020. Interest rates have gone up since then. So this would be the year when, they're up for renewal. Maybe they can't afford their payments anymore because of the increase in the rates. So they're trying to unload those, but people can't buy because we have an affordability crisis. And so we're looking at a lot of foreclosures, I think, coming up really soon within the next year. I think the whole thing is coming down. And it's going to be absolutely disastrous when it does. We're talking like, Great Depression level stuff.
So can the boomer generation deal with that? That's the question. So like I see, well, Gen Xers are probably going to get hurt quite a bit on this one. Millennials, we're kind of caught in the middle. Gen Zers, like these young people, they're hoping it happens. Like, come on. Crash. They want nothing more than for the market to crash, because that is the sign that everything ends and they can start afresh. They're hoping for that, because there is no other hope other than that. They want all the slumlords to lose all their equity, and those kids are going to be dancing in the streets when that happens.
Yep. I mean, like, I can't blame them. Honestly, Clyde, like the last election, I remember CTV ran a poll, and the number one issues by generation, boomers was Donald Trump, elbows up, and Gen Z was housing. And so we got elbows up, and Gen Z's like homeless. So I can't really blame, that kind of like animosity toward the system in particular. and like that would serve their interests if the whole thing came crashing down. So I think we need to like figure something out here, man, to manage this thing, because that is going to happen. Like it is going to crash.
Well, is it going to
the next year? It's going to crash.
Well, it's going to crash. It's going to crash.
Yeah.
There's the fundamentals just don't exist where that this can continue.
No.
At all. And then the question then is, well, are we bracing for it, or are we hitting the accelerator on the way to that decline? Because I see what it almost looks like the Canadian government under Mark Carney, it seems like he's come to finish the job. and looted on the way out. Yes. It's never been this egregious. We've had corruption for as long as I recall in government, but it was always like skim a little off the top, nobody say anything, and everybody else is doing fine. This is a wholesale robbery. I mean, when you see Carney come in, you got Brookfield being awarded contract after contract after contract, Stellantis grabbing cash, running away, all these other companies. It was like, I think they got about $10 billion.
10 billion, yeah.
About 10 billion. Like they were promised a lot more, but they got that much, and then they went and invested 13 billion in Illinois. They walked away, and like, what are you gonna do about it? This is what it bothers me, because I'm a free market, laissez-faire capitalist. I'm one of those dirty capitalists. And I think that if you want to encourage companies to come into your country and do business, you lower their taxes, lower the barrier to do stuff. So like get rid of all the red tape and just get the hell out of their way. Allow them to operate and allow other people in the market, allow your native population the ability to not be overregulated so that they can build businesses in the first place.
Yeah. And this is another one of these things. You see, it's the 70s radicals, the radicals from the 70s, who set off 5 bombs a day on average in the United States and gave us the FLQ crisis in Canada. Like FLQ was Marxist-Leninist. Black Panthers, third wave feminism, across the board, the radicals in the 1970s, like they didn't go anywhere. They're still here. They still live amongst us. It's just that they've had decades to continue climbing the social ladder. So they're the deans and the tenure professors and the editorial boards at the press, and so this is kind of this is the strain of the boomer generation that I'm talking about. You're right. It's not the Alberta types. It's not like, I work with tons of boomers and all this stuff, of course, all the time, like through my political advocacy and through Veterans for Freedom and so on and so forth. Like there are some real wonderful people out there whom I love, but there's a trend within that generation that is really kind of at the root of all the problems that we're faced with right now. And you talk about like the looting of the public coffers. I look at things like Arrive scam, and I'm like, well, where's Justin Trudeau's fingerprints on that? It looks like it was all between the senior bureaucrats and the contractors, and they're all laughing at us while they rip us off. So I think that, like I said, Pierre Poilievre's calling out the senior ranks at the RCMP. In the military, we had like the whole General Vance.
I don't think he did enough. Let's just be honest. I don't think he did enough when it comes to calling out the senior brass at the RCMP. But you know that big super drug lab that was busted in British Columbia. Were you aware? Were you aware that the State Department was putting pressure on Canada for over a year to do something about the facility that they informed them about?
I'm not surprised. I mean, the State Department is trying to get wiretaps on frickin' terrorists and ethnic triad types here in Canada, and the RCMP will say, okay, but according to Canadian law, we have to notify them that you are monitoring them, like things like this. Because we don't have, I don't know,
but they survey the crap out of us all the time. Yeah. Like, what the hell is that?
Well, we're I think the Canadian system, because it's a Westminster heritage system, and we tend to be more socialist than the United States. We're somewhere between the U.S. and Britain, maybe, or Europe. We like to think of ourselves as more European, or at least the cosmopolitan elites do. Like, not me, but
that's that hoity-toity
like,
thing that happens in like what is it?
champagne socialists.
Yeah, the Laurentians.
Yes.
Like, oh, we're smarter than we put our pinkies up when we drink. I just can't stand it.
Absolutely,
it's pretentious and it's one of the things that bothers me most about people like that. They'll say big words that almost don't fit the context just to be the big word in the sentence. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and speaking of the nose up in the air Laurentian elites, and I'm talking about this particular generation of Laurentian elites. Like, think David Johnson. It's like I feel like I'm in an episode.
That was the
Special rapporteur.
Rapporteur. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, you remember, like, people were saying you have conflicts of interest, or Pierre Poilievre was saying it, and he would say, I have never had anyone question my integrity before. And it's like, dude, it's a process. You're breaking the rules. Okay. Like, he's not wrong for pointing that out, but he thinks it's like all about him. And he's got the kind of nose up in the air attitude. That's what we're faced with right now. It was like Jody Thomas that was at the center of the Emergency Measures Act invocation. It was Janice Charette who covered it up. And she was the one who took over for Michael Wernick, the first clerk of the Privy Council office to resign in disgrace in the history of Canada. So this is what we're dealing with. The post office collapsed, for crying out loud, at one point. Remember that? When we were coming back from COVID? Justin Trudeau didn't have anything to do with that. Somebody set up that post office 150 years ago and forgot about it. It's been running like clockwork ever since. So
yeah. Like,
it's clockwork. The senior management. And I've been saying, like, the firefighters union out here in Nova Scotia, when we were dealing with all this woods ban and fires and stuff all summer during fire season, when not allowed out summer anymore, the union was calling out the senior brass. Like, they didn't manage anything, they didn't staff anything, they didn't execute a plan, they didn't use the resources, volunteer fire departments that were at their disposal effectively. And I'm like, yes, I know, it's the boomers. I've been watching them do this to Canada's military for 20 years. That's what it is. They can't manage, lead, or kind of like care about other people.
The result here in Canada is devastating. It absolutely is. And here's the result. Better Dwelling is reporting on Canada. Most Canadians permanently leaving are fleeing Ontario and BC, and goes into the stats on just how many people are fleeing. This isn't actually the most up to date. The most up to date that I saw was a stat from them. They said up until the end of Q2 in 2025, in the 12 months up until that point, we lost 120,000 Canadians. And those aren't, obviously the Canadians that are leaving aren't Canadians that are going somewhere to drive Uber, right? Those are going to be skilled laborers. Those are going to be
people with means.
People with means, people with investments, people with all kinds. We're losing billions in investments every quarter. It's outrageous, the amount of money that's flooding out of the country.
Yeah.
How do you save that? Is there a political solution? Because I was looking at the last election as that political solution. And I think a lot of people with money or skills saw it the same way, and they're packing their bags.
I saw it that way in like 2019. I was like, I was so convinced that was the election that everything hanged on, that I even let Pierre Poilievre put a lawn sign on my corner lot in Ottawa, knowing full well that I could have been court-martialed for it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I was still in the military and everything, but I thought the situation was so dire in 2019 that I let them do that. And what a disappointment he turned out to be, a son of a bitch. I hate that guy. He's the guy that I called. He was my MP, and I called him when I had to sneak out of Iraq to come and deal with the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, calling my 16-year-old daughter directly and telling her to come on in for her sex change because that's the legal age of consent in Ontario, and she didn't need daddy's permission anymore. I called him and told him all about it, and then he went ahead and voted for Bill C-4 to throw me in jail for ever objecting to that kind of conduct on the part of children's hospitals. These people are out of their minds, by the way. I never felt evil anywhere in the world like I did at the Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario in Ottawa. Anyway, that's my rant about Pierre Poilievre. That's another guy that I have.
You're not the only one saying this, though. So
he's a snake. He's an absolute liar. And then when I co-organized the 1 Million March for Children and led that fight to his doorstep, he got out in front of the news cameras and pretended like he didn't know what puberty blockers were. I told him all about it.
Oh, there was a lot of people, including myself, disappointed on that one. This is from Mr. Sunshine Baby. Says shots fired. Kevin O'Leary has this to say about conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, and here's his bit.
He has told us that they made significant gains with demographics that they weren't necessarily successful for years.
You know, you sound like a CEO I recently whacked.
Perfect.
You either win or you lose.
Yeah.
It's that simple. I don't give a shit what the excuse is. You had a mandate, you failed, you get whacked. That's how it's a very Darwinian world that way. And I'm sorry, politics is even worse. The excuses don't matter. What matters is you either won or you lost. Period.
Yeah. You either won or you lost, period. By the way, that's off of a podcast that's put together by two CBC ex-employees and this is the funny thing. The inner like circle of politics is so I don't even what do you say? Like what's the word for it? Incestuous? It's crazy because they started a podcast. They barely have any viewers, and they've already had Pierre Poilievre, I think a bunch of others, Kevin O'Leary on their show. It's like, what, man? It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Of course, they'll never come on my show because apparently I heard recently from someone that the word around there is too controversial. Can't talk about these things. But you know, this goes back to when I was helping organize just like you during the last election. Well, except you were in 2019. My local candidate came around, wanted to take me out for lunch, would not show up on my show. It's like, this is really weird. Why not? Why won't you come on my show? You'll talk to me in person. Oh, well, you know, it is what it is. And then he gave me this quid pro quo. Because he said, hey, you know Rob you've been talking to that's trying to run for the Conservative nomination down in Burnaby? I said, yeah, he's a great guy. He's lovely. He had me over at his place. He did barbecue. Him and his wife are really nice people. And he's like, he's not one of our guys. I'm like, yeah. He says, well, you know, depending on who you're, you know, rubbing elbows with and hanging out with, you know, it could get you more access. I'm like, is this a quid pro quo? He's like, well, no, not really. That's not what I'm saying. Yeah, okay. So you have to toe the line. You have to say the right things. You have to speak with the right people. You can't talk with the wrong people. And if you do, you don't get access. You don't get to ask questions. And I always wondered, because I reached out a whole bunch of times to the campaigns, and it was really like eye-opening to see just how it plays. And that sucks. That sucks a lot.
Play the game, as they say.
Play the game, and don't have your own ideas, or don't have, you know, your own convictions. Just play the game. I can't do it. I won't be a part of that.
I know. I heard that like my entire military career. I tell you what, I can remember like very early on, the first time I heard it, it was like, I got to play the game. And I was like, what game? What are you talking about? And they're like, you know what I mean?
I thought we were doing the patriotism thing. Yeah.
and I was like, well, what are the rules? And they're like, oh, come on. You know what I mean? You got to play the game. And anyway,
if you won't say the rules out loud, or
Yeah.
if you allude to them or you pull this crap,
Yeah.
that you're not playing right, and you know that you're doing a wrong thing. You know
I remember.
you're.
I remember what I said now. I was like 22 and cocky as I'll get out. So, you know, I was asking, like, hey, how do you play the game? And they were like, you know what I mean? I said, you want me to kiss your ass? And they were like, no, that's not what I mean. I was like, yeah, I think so. And this was my supervisor I was talking to. Yeah, I got in trouble. I got written up and everything. But
Speaking of getting in trouble, you walked in the woods when you weren't supposed to walk in the woods.
I did a lot of things I wasn't supposed to do. I'm still fighting about mask mandates. I got a decision last week from the Nova Scotia Court of Appeals because I've been self-representing like a maniac over mask mandates, and you know it's just impossible. They're saying like, you know, it's legally mandated. I'm like, how could it possibly be? We have a constitution, but they said it hasn't been challenged. You know, there was no charter challenge. And I was like, but I didn't live here when they did this. I retired from the military and I came back. So like by the time, because you have, you don't have very long anyway to submit a charter challenge to something like that. So it was like, I did put charter challenges in, but they were for my arrests when I got arrested. And then nobody shows up in court because they look at my charter challenge and they go, uh-oh, we're going to be in a lot of trouble if we show up in court. And this guy's got this defense here.
So they just don't show up, and then it.
Yeah. For the first time, they did not show up, and the judge was like, okay, none of the witnesses showed up, so case dismissed, bang the gavel, and that was it. And then the second time, the Crown contacted me and withdrew the charges 2 days out from the court date. It was all a shakedown.
So you don't get a ruling. They just dismiss the case and you're free to go?
That's right. They just dismiss the case and you're free to go. And so I still pursue these human rights complaints and try to get the Human Rights Commission to take them seriously because like they're writing their own law, essentially. It's ridiculous. But the lower courts didn't give me, well, the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia didn't give me a favorable decision. The Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission tried to say that because I used political belief, affiliation, and activity. I was like, look, I'm protesting a mandate, and that's a political activity. And they're like, no, it isn't. You don't belong to a political party. And I was like, actually, yes, I do, and no, that is not required under the law, like you say, right?
Yeah.
They put it in their decision letter. Under the act, you have to be a member of a political party. And I was like, no, you don't.
To protest
yes,
something?
I am. Honestly, yes, this is what they're trying to, and they just blow you off, you know. And now the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal says, well, nobody challenged it on charter grounds, and I was like, I did, but you wouldn't hear it because you withdrew all the charges and didn't show up in court.
That's corrupt as hell, dude.
I know. Like, what are you supposed to do? How are you ever supposed to get these mandates reviewed? And they came into effect in like 2020. I didn't move here until late 2021. So by then, like I was already getting arrested and stuff and just trying to find a way into the system. And then once you get there, they don't show up in court.
Are you expecting that this is how they're going to play with your walking in the woods? I can't believe I'm saying this.
No.
28 grand for walking in the woods.
No, I think we got them this time. Because when I say this time, because I actually tried this in 2023. They brought in the same thing, blanket woods ban all over Nova Scotia because of the wildfire season in 2023. And that was bad. Like the Barrington fire was really bad. And they screamed about climate change, and it turned out to be arson. So they were a little more reluctant to scream about climate change this time. I guess that's progress. But I submitted a judicial review in 2023, and the judge said I didn't have standing because I wasn't fined. It was like, in order for you to have standing, you would have had to have been fined, so you have something to challenge. And I was like, well, that's not what you said about my charter challenges for the mask violations. And so they didn't hear it in 2023. And when they came back in with it in 2025, I said, well, I know what I got to do now. I got to go out and I got to get fined. So I went out and I got fined, and
you're so polite. You're so polite. Hey, boys. Don't mean to bother you, but I'm gonna go walk in the woods. I know I'm not supposed to. Yeah. That's so funny, man.
Thanks, man. And I think it helped. Like I was a little bit of professional courtesy went a long way there. It was just kind of something, you know. it's ridiculous. I saw one of the guys after that, the guy who wrote the ticket. There was something wrong with I don't know, between the courts and between them. Everybody's kind of pointing at each other, but I had to get issued another ticket at one point. And the guy who showed up here was actually like pretty jovial about it. You know, and he's in the recording with me. He's the guy who threatens to double my fine. It's just like, he's just a regular guy from my neighborhood, you know, who has a job to do. So I didn't want to take it out on him. I know that his superiors expect him to say things to try to deter me from violating the ban. So he says, I'll double your fine. It's total bullshit, of course. But that's what his superiors, that's the kind of thing they're expecting him to do. So, you know, really, he was kind of laughing about it when he issued me the ticket and said, you know, he thought it was pretty funny that Joe Rogan mentioned it. Only he said Saskatchewan. So,
Joe Rogan mentioned it. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he did. He said that was a $28,000 good move. He said that's what, something like that. But he thought it was Saskatchewan, so it was a bit, you know.
So it's going to be a while yet before you get your day in court for that one, eh?
Well, we have the judicial reviews this time. So last time in 2023, they dismissed it on standing, but they also tried to dismiss it on mootness because by the time it gets to court, the ban's already been lifted. We've already taken that off the table.
Good.
They're not going to argue mootness. They're not going to argue standing. It is going ahead. So the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms has the judicial review submitted in my private interest because I'm the guy who got fined. And I tried arguing private and public interests in 2023, but now the Canadian Constitution Foundation also has a judicial review submitted in the public interest. So this is like two lawsuits, two different civil liberties organizations, one in the private interest, one in the public interest. I don't think that we're going to get a better shot at reining these people in than we have with this right now. So, yeah, giddy up.
Giddy up indeed. In fact, I have John Carpe coming on Thursday. We're going to be talking about other things that they're working on.
Okay.
Yeah, Justice Center are doing good work and
they're great.
Trying to get stuff done. I mean, with what the courts will allow, it's insane what things are being dismissed for. Mootness, standing, a number of other issues that they just say, oh well, we don't want to do. For one, if we did do it, there would be precedents, and then they can't pull this crap on you again. So they're just trying to walk away from it, get away from it, and not deal with it in the immediate. And then the government gets to screw with people over and over again.
Mm-hmm. Again, I mean, it must be said, like, I think that the judicial notice was another disgrace that they did through the pandemic, where they took judicial notice on the factual accuracy of claims about vaccine mandates and the like from the public health officers themselves. Like, you take the government to court, and the court is like, hey, government, are you overreaching? And the government's like, no, judge. And and they just bang the gavel, like, case dismissed. Like,
it's that easy. It's that easy for them.
Yeah, and they can't see how ridiculous this is. But I'm like, yeah, you guys can't do your jobs, just like the generals.
They're all supposed to have adversarial roles. They're all supposed to be you taking the power that they have and holding on to that instead of just relinquishing it to the other branch. This is crazy. Like, we are, like, I know it was funny because we had the No Kings protest last weekend. I don't know if you caught it, the Canadians for No Kings. Like,
that prompted me to reach out to you to talk about the boomers too, is because everybody people have been noticing now. I've been talking about this for 4 years, and ever since I retired from the military, and I'm like, yes, you see, it's the 70s radicals. They're the elbows up crew. They're anti-American, Marxist-Leninist from their early years. You mentioned things like intersectionality, Kimberly Crenshaw, that's right, over female. Gender is a social construct, Judith Butler, same thing. So like the list goes on. That's what we're up against right now.
Was it was the guy named Money? The guy who originally did the gender research stuff that's all been debunked now. He had two twins. One had They were boys. One had a botched circumcision. So at that time, they decided, we're going to run an experiment with these twins.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
Yeah, I don't remember his
Years
name.
ago, I read about it,
but he's another one of these weirdos in academia, in doctor circles. That's like, I'm gonna do this thing and just torment an individual or two individuals. And long story short, the kid grew up thinking that he was a female.
Yeah,
because it was always told this. John Money in the chat, thank you guys. John Money was the doctor. I think he was discredited afterwards and ruined this person's life.
Yeah.
The person
Look how many
then
people
later
lives
tried
in the world
to.
right now.
That's it. The person later tried to re-establish his life as a male, but had gone through all these cross-sex hormones for such a long time, and it all ended tragically with the person taking their own life. And like, it's just. And now we're seeing that everywhere. Yeah. Absolutely everywhere. In fact, I hate to laugh about this stuff, but it's comical. Guy, much like Billboard Chris from the US, he goes around with a sign that says trans women are men. Yeah. And I have this video, it's so funny, where he's dressed as Santa Claus and he's holding the sign, and some lady comes out and shouts at him, "Don't do political stuff dressed as Santa Claus. You'll confuse the children." He's like, "What about children that are confused about men dressed as women?" She's like, "Don't stop." She just like loses it on him. Oh, and it's like, God. Wow, you didn't even see that. You didn't see the irony of you telling him don't dress a certain way because it'll confuse children. Yeah. Perhaps that's something you need to get through your head.
That's fabulous. Yeah.
Right. Well done. And this is with the No Kings protest, right? So the irony being,
we actually do have a king. He's our head of state.
Right. So a country with a king having No Kings protests against a country who doesn't have a king and has a president protesting against that president. It's just absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
You know how I know he's not a king? The election. He was elected.
And not only that, I would argue that his second term should have been his second term. There was shenanigans in that election.
Oh,
I think he won that. But despite him winning it and trying to fight it and being hit in the courts, just like you're being hit and all these other people in Canada, where the courts they didn't rule against the merit of the case, they ruled against standing. Yeah. So they didn't allow him to fight his case. So what did he do? He sat it out for 4 years and he waited and he did it again. And he won.
Yeah. Yep.
So tell me that that's a tyrant. Tell me that that's a king. Tell me that that's a guy who's so thirsty for power he'll do anything. He didn't. It's crazy. I have so much respect for Trump and his family and the whole movement. Like the MAGA movement is I'm so behind it. I'm absolutely enamored with because for me, it's a breath of fresh air. I've been watching for decades and decades the Western world go down this drain of wasted, and I mean like hundreds of years wasted of human activity, going from the Magna Carta to the Enlightenment to all of this, where we've come to a time where we actually have real liberty, and then watching people just wisp it away for entitlements and BS. And to watch that turn around and watch people, a rich billionaire come out and be the champion for liberty, I could have never predicted that. That would never have been on my bingo card. And here we are. I loved it.
I know, me too. And Donald Trump is the greatest boomer who's ever lived. That's my take. But he actually says, I didn't sacrifice when I was young, so I'm going to sacrifice now that I'm old. And that is has he ever? And that is kind of another one of these imbalances where the boomer generation was, passed over for serving Canada in war. Because we didn't do Vietnam at all. In fact, we became a haven for draft dodgers. Now 20 to 40,000 Canadians actually went to the United States to serve in the Vietnam War, but most of them probably would have stayed in the United States even after the war. And so we ended up with all these smelly AIDS-ridden ingrates in Canada, and they kind of got all our best. And so now we're like full commie just when you have the United States obviously going in the other direction. And Trump, we did the elbows up thing all the way up to the 2 minutes of hate from 1984. It's just that Trump was Orange Goldstein, and everybody was encouraged to look at Orange Goldstein on the telescreen and just voiced all of their pain and anger and blame onto him. And it was all the way to booing wounded veterans from the United States at the Invictus Games. I was just disgusted, absolutely disgusted. They're booing the national anthem. All of that was absolutely vile. So they drove that all the way up. And what is Goldstein in 1984? He's a dissident elite. So that's Trump. He broke ranks with the elites, with the boomer generation of elites, said, I didn't sacrifice when I was young. This country's been really good to me. I think I need to pay it forward, so I'm going to sacrifice when I'm old. And that's kind of what needs to happen, really, across the board. Is more of the boomers need to take that responsibility, like a sense of civic duty, leave something better for the next generation. That's I was thinking when I was young, one less war that they're going to have to fight, that kind of thing. That's sort of the whole project that we're engaged in, called civilization collectively. And it's just kind of like they're a little past due right now on their sacrifice. So follow the example of Donald Trump. Be like Trump.
Be like Trump.
Yes.
And you just reminded me of something that really irked me. Every time the U.S. comes up, and we talk about, what's going on with the trade war and what's going on with all of this. Anytime the U.S. does something that we don't like, Canadians have this. Have you ever had a friend that always reminds you of that thing he did, the favor he did for you? And you can never live up to that favor. And you're just like, dude, I've done everything I can, but that one time you mowed my lawn, it's like, I'll never live it down. Right. And this is right. And anytime America does anything that Canada doesn't like, it's always like, yeah, well, we fought the 2 wars and we sacrificed, and it just always comes up. And like, I don't want those people that fought their names to be in vain for some gotcha moment for a bunch of people who've done nothing. Right?
Yeah.
Because that's BS. It's stolen valor, in my opinion, to be like, yeah, well, we were the guys who did Second World War when you guys didn't. It's like, well, do you know the history of America? Do you know the sacrifice that they put into the First World War, and the fact that they weren't that willing to just jump into another conflict, like only a decade later? Are you freaking kidding me?
The king wanted us to.
There you go.
We were there before them because the king wanted us to be there. Like, they didn't get in until after Pearl Harbor, right? Like,
yes.
So yeah,
but and then the Americans would always turn around and say, "Well, yeah, well, we showed up and we won," right? And that's
fair. Fair.
It's
and
fair.
it's also fair, I think, that the Russians defeated something like 93% of Panzer divisions. Well, the Russian winter defeated something like 93% of
right.
Panzer
But like then it goes to this was my favorite moment of the whole campaign, and this kicked off when the campaign first started, when they announced that there was going to be an election. Pierre Poilievre came out, and I was like, oh, thank God. There's going to be a guy who's going to be the common sense guy. He's going to tell Canadians, we shouldn't be looking to start a fight with the Americans. We should be making friends with them. And we're going to be the better people, and we're going to mend differences. What did he do? He got up in front of the Canadian people, and he said this BS. This is what he said.
As Winston Churchill said, though, you can always count on the Americans to do the right thing after exhausting all other possibilities. As Winston...
Ha ha ha! Isn't that funny? Now he went on to exhaust all other possibilities instead of standing up for children's rights, parental rights, instead of mentioning anything about the ostriches situation over there in British Columbia, a myriad of different issues where he's absolutely last to the punch on those things, exhaust every option to just stay away from it and not talk about it.
I'm pretty
But
sure Melissa Landsman was making fun of us. This is the month of the birds when she was talking about the Blue Jays. Did you see that? I'm pretty sure
no,
that they were mocking us initially. They seem to be pandering in the right direction now, and that is Pierre. It's like I said, like when I called him as a constituent to tell him what was going on at the children's hospitals, he blew me off and voted to put me in jail. But when I led the march, with my co-organizers, the 1 Million March for Children, with Hands Off Our Kids, he got out in front of the news cameras and said, "What's all this stuff about puberty blockers? Oh, I don't know. We're not supposed to be doing that." And it's like, you voted for it. He knew you need to give this guy a bandwagon to climb onto, and he will. Like the grassroots pressure, he is actually responsive to it. He's a panderer, so you got to give him a bandwagon. And if you build one big enough, he will climb onto it.
but it has to be big.
Yeah, it does
It has
have
to be big, and it's always after the fact. It's like I'm sure he'll be outraged once all the ostriches are dead, and then it'll be a big talking point that you can't screw with people's property. But that's, I mean,
once it's too late to be helpful.
That's right. When
yeah.
it's too late, when it's over. It was the case when parents were marching in the streets for parental rights, and they were being slandered by everybody. The newspapers, the unions, the politicians were calling them bigots and calling them all these things. Yep. And it's like, no, they just want to be in charge of what their children are learning.
Yeah.
That's really, really not a huge thing to ask.
We just don't want our children being brainwashed to butcher themselves into permanent medical patients. And there's big money in this for big pharma as well as in the donor class. So, this is the sickest thing to ever happen in Canada. And we need like a full and open public inquiry into how this went wrong. And I think the Trump administration is talking jail time for some of these butchers. So that's an example that we should follow. I don't care. Like you took a Hippocratic oath, and look at what you're doing to these children. You're experimenting on these children like goddamn Nazi Germany out here. There needs to be something like a Nuremberg too. That this should be investigated along with the gene therapy experiments that they mass marketed as vaccines to the population, and then coerce this into taking them. All of this madness that's occurred since 2020, like it is on that level. It's like I said, it's a fourth turning. The last one would have been the World War II, and that's what we got when things came back on the upswing. Was we had Nuremberg trials. So that's I think where we are again.
Yeah, I got to ask you, what are your thoughts on 51st state? That's the grumbling. This is one of those things where if you're in favor of it, you're gonna get attacked by people everywhere. It's amazing. I've watched people that are close to me that are very good people come out in favor of it, get fired. It was almost COVID-esque when it first happened. Yeah, I know a guy who got fired over it.
At least,
yeah,
it's quite Soviet.
Well, that's what happens when you live in Victoria, British Columbia. It's crazy.
Exactly.
Crazy. Oh man.
Yeah, and 51st state. So what I'll say about that is, well, first of all, Trump is talking about a domestic tax policy. He's taxing Americans when it comes to the tariffs. There were two countries in the entire world who retaliated, China and us. So I think that says all you need to know about our true standing in the world. We're basically a proxy for the Chinese Communist Party, especially the Chinese Communist Liberal Party of Canada, as I like to call them. I mean, I just lost where I was going with this, but
with the 51st state thing, and
51st state, yeah. I remember saying during the election, because people were talking about him like he was a threat. I was like, okay, we're talking about tariffs because China just put a 100% tariff on our canola, on our pork, and now they're going after our seafood. So they're like destroying our food productivity. They're going to make it harder for us to eat. It's going to get more expensive for us to eat because of their actions. Trump is saying he wants to American car companies to build American cars in America. And somehow he's the threat. China executed 4 of our citizens that we know of since the start of this year. So, and the United States is the threat. It's clearly a distraction, from the real threat, because our government is a proxy for the real threat for China.
Or could that be that all these Chinese tariffs are affecting the West and not so much Ontario and Quebec?
I'm sure that's a factor. Yeah, but like in the bigger scheme of things, when you see the reaction, like the disparate reaction from our political leaders to the execution of 4 Canadian citizens, and they turn around and say that Donald Trump is the threat to our sovereignty, I tend to, I think, maybe it's a little bit of confirmation bias on my part, but I tend to think that those things are going hand in hand in part of the same scheme. Feel free to let me know if maybe that's just biased.
I was referring mostly to the tariffs. So the tariffs are on canola. That's going to affect the prairies. That's for sure a thing there. Seafood, West Coast, not really an Ottawa problem, not really a Doug Ford
Atlantic,
problem. Atlantic Canada for sure. That's a thing. It seems to be really revolving around Doug Ford and what's happening in Ontario. He's having a hissy fit because American companies are pulling out, like automotive manufacturing. Why wouldn't they? It just doesn't make sense to stick around in Ontario when they have manufacturing and people capable of it across the border in the United States. And then they just, they only went into Canada because of how busy it got in the turn of the 19th century. Now they're just pulling back. Really, that's kind of what it looks like. Steel, aluminum. Trump's like, no, make it here.
Yeah.
That's it.
And it's a business decision, and he works for the American people, so he's doing what they elected him to do. And throwing a hissy fit, like you say, like Slug Ford, that quite frankly, that is typical boomer male behavior. Like he just throws a tantrum when he doesn't get his way. He thinks that I guess reality is supposed to bend its will to his ego or something. It just doesn't work that way, Slug. Like, you need to get off your ass, be a grown up about this, and start making some sensible decisions with your brain and not so much with your ego, for crying out loud. Like
so pouring a whiskey out was not the best idea.
Wasn't it bottled in Canada anyway? I'm pretty sure it was. So
Crown Royal, the story goes, Crown Royal is made in Manitoba.
Yeah.
It's made in Manitoba, but then there's a bottling plant in Amherstburg, Ontario. That after the tariffs, it just made more sense to ship the full barrels and then bottle it in the U.S. because then they're not paying per unit over the border. They're paying just per barrel, which saves them a ton of money. And then Ontario lost 150 jobs, and Doug Ford had a hissy fit. Like he lost it. He pours out a bottle of Crown Royal, a Canadian company, and he threatens to take their alcohol off the shelf in Canada. And it's like, or in Ontario.
And has he done anything useful or helpful at all? Because I can't think of anything. But Danielle Smith is at least going down. She's a Gen Xer, so grown up. So she's at least like going down to Mar-a-Lago and hanging out with them and greasing the skid, like for the sake of her constituents, to make sure that they don't feel the brunt of it. But everything just gets worse with Slug Ford.
It's so ridiculous. Yeah, he did this gaslighting commercial that cost Ontarians $75 million in the United States. It was an old speech by Ronald Reagan that he chopped up and took out of context talking about tariffs to try to make the Americans look bad. When you look at the actual context of what he was saying, he was saying tariffs are bad, but I'm adding them to Japan because they're bad actors right now. And that was what had happened in the 1980s. And he took it out of context and he spent taxpayers' money on the U.S. Now, the question here, though, is 51st state, Donald Trump made a joke, just become part of America and you don't have to pay these tariffs. It's a joke. It's probably half true. Like, it would be nice to acquire the territory, probably not to acquire the voters. And this is like, as an American myself, I don't want Ontarians, the people who elected Mark Carney, to be voting in U.S. elections. I don't want that. I don't mind if Alberta becomes a state, something like that. That makes sense. If Canada becomes insolvent, what's the alternative, though? If Canada becomes insolvent, would you rather? And this boggles my mind that Canadians are the only people in the world that would look at their neighbors that want to come and help them out of the trouble that they've caused themselves.
Yes.
And they see that as a threat.
Well, and you know, I guess I did get a little bit sidetracked there when you asked me this the first time with the Chinese Communist Party, but the compare or contrast, I think, is important because you have China executing 4 of our citizens on one side, Donald Trump on the other, making us a very generous offer. By the way, like, and I don't think it was a joke. I think he was serious, and he's making a very generous offer to like increase the amount of money in all of our bank accounts, lower our, because you know, he offered the American dollar for dollar, lower our taxes by like 40 to 60%. You know, give us the best defense in the entire world. Like, this solves so many of our problems. And so, but I wouldn't say that I'm pro 51st state, because I kind of think that we should do it ourselves and we'll be a better nation for it. Like, if we take responsibility for this mess ourselves and solve our own problems, you know, bear our own hardships, then we'll be a better nation for it. You know, and then we'll be going around telling younger generations, like, you don't know how much we all sacrificed for you guys, and you got to pay it for the next generation. And, you know, and the hashtag never again. It's
you know what the sacrifice I see happening, though? The sacrifice that I see happening is Canadian elites, and I'm being told in the chat, stop blaming Ontario. 90% of Ontario voted Conservative. Okay, Southern Ontario is that one little pocket that owns all of the votes, apparently. Northern Ontario, you're good. But
that's a problem.
So in Canada, where was I? I just brain farted because of that. But
sorry.
No, we're good. It was on the subject of the 51st state and the option to join it's a great offer. It's a great offer. And here's where I was. What are we sacrificing in order to stay away from America, or being friends with America, or you know what I mean? It don't have to become the 51st state, but what are we sacrificing in order to do that? Well, we're our sovereignty, because we have this tremendous debt, but what's on the line with getting a better relationship with the United States? The dairy lobby, the telecom, mess,
all the monopolies,
all of the monopolies. Those
Yes.
are the things that are wrong with Canada's market, its protectionism, and what the United States would like to get rid of. Who benefits from those things? A small group of Canadians, a small group.
Yep.
Who doesn't benefit from those? Well, America doesn't care that much. They would like to enter the Canadian market, but the Canadian consumer would benefit the most out of that deal.
Yes, absolutely.
But what is it? Like, we don't have our sovereignty because it's not Bell that's offering the service? Like,
what the hell is that? Does that mean anyway? Like, he was not talking about subordinating Canada to the United States. He was offering statehood. So, like, we would still have self-determination. Like, we would get to vote. You know, what are you talking about sovereignty? It's this, the the Corporation of Canada, and I'm not one of those guys. Like, I understand that they're illegal.
Yeah. I live on the maritime law. I'm a boat captain.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
I
That
get that.
we would just like reincorporate our territory as a U.S. state as opposed to a British Dominion. You know, like we would still have sovereignty in the sense that we would be sovereign individuals and self-determining. You know, with elections and a better electoral system than we have now. If you know,
But
if
even
we
if Canada stayed Canada, didn't join the United States, but dropped all of those things, scrapped the dairy lobby, got rid of the telecom monopolies, or just, you don't have to get rid of them. Just open the markets. Just allow the markets, allow American companies to flood into Canadian markets. A lot of people in those companies will go broke. That's just inevitability of it. But
and that's what I think we should do.
And immediately the consumer benefits, the entrepreneurship would jump through the roof, because they'd be like, really? You had to deregulate all these markets to allow the American companies in? Well, guess what? You're going to have Canadians competing as well. Like homegrown Canadian companies competing in the same marketplace, which is possible without all this stupid regulation that causes these monopolies to have their power. So Canada does not have to become a 51st state to have all the benefits of being a 51st state and being able to keep, have its cake and eat it too.
And that is what I think we should do. That's what I say. Like, to become the 51st state, frankly, is to hit the easy button. There's absolutely no reason to be hostile toward the Americans for making us a generous offer, but I think that we will be a better nation for it over the long term if, instead of hitting the easy button and getting all that short-term gain and foregoing the long-term pain, I think if we just kind of bear those hardships ourselves, like, we can make a system better than the Americans. Why don't we start with kind of something like that they have and tweak it up a little bit for ourselves? We can move the ball forward a little bit. This is an opportunity, as every crisis is. So, I think that's actually the better option over the long term. But at the same time, I just want to emphasize that the offer to incorporate us into the United States as a state is not a threat. It's a generous offer.
Yes, and it's not seen that way. I just can't believe it. The reaction to it just does not reflect what is there and what's being offered, and that's what's sad about the whole thing. And it saddens me.
Keystone XL, we should be the richest country in the world, and we could be, like I say, if we do it ourselves and do it over the long term. We can tailor everything to make ourselves the richest country in the world. It's astonishing how much we have in terms of natural resources. Like, our kids should be richer than Arabs, for crying out loud. Arab Gulf states, of course. I mean, but but that is not the case, and it's needless. Like, we suffer needlessly for the system. We're slaves. Like, we're slaves to the system, especially the kids.
And what's crazy to me is the profits that these monopolies get are peanuts compared to what everybody would get if those monopolies didn't exist.
Yeah.
What does the dairy lobby pull in compared to, I don't know, the oil and natural gas business, agriculture as a whole? If Quebec would get off their ass and start pulling some of the resources out of the ground there, if we could secure some of our mineral rights, it's astonishing what we would be capable of, and we do it for crappy milk, and not good milk, crappy milk with palm oil all over it.
Crappy, expensive milk. Here in Nova Scotia, we have offshore oil and gas. We have shale. We have uranium, for crying out loud. And they've had a mining ban in place since the early 80s. So none of that stuff is being explored. Some stuff is already, they have wells that are capped and this kind of thing. But the province has been in the way for so long. They just lifted the mining ban this year. Nobody even bid on the exploration contract, like the rights to do the exploration, because the word is out that Canada, Nova Scotia in particular, in this case, is hostile to investment. So, why would anybody invest in something in our natural resources when in a single election cycle it could go like entirely commie in the other direction. That the whole thing just turns on a dime. It's too volatile for investment right now. So
You guys have some really nice windmills. I saw them flying into Nova Scotia. They're so ugly. It ruins the landscape. It's awful.
conservative Tim Houston transitions more kids per capita than any other province in Canada. So yeah, instead of mining uranium that Europe absolutely needs, they're buying it from Russia. The United States is importing it. We have ports and rail and everything right here in Nova Scotia to get it to them. And instead of doing that, we're doing windmill-powered biomedical gender transitions for minors.
Windmill-powered biogen. Oh man, those were not words I ever thought I would hear in my lifetime. That's unbelievable.
The 2020s, eh?
Jeff Evely, I'm gonna go through some of these super chats before we head on out of here. Awesome. Thank you so much for joining the show, man. It's so awesome.
Always a
to
pleasure,
have you.
man. Yeah.
Absolutely. We got Mechanics for $10 says the government is already promoting the bread lines, for the children. I did a show just the other day about the NDP. They're actually talking about making government grocery stores.
Yeah.
Like, did you know it was a state supermarket that ended socialism in Russia?
No doubt. Yeah, that sounds about right.
When Yeltsin came to visit, they were showing him off all this stuff. They showed him off the NASA center. They showed him all this stuff, and he's like, "Yep." And then they brought him to a supermarket on the way by because they wanted to grab something. He goes in there. He couldn't believe the stuff that he was seeing just in a regular, everyday supermarket.
Yeah.
And he wrote about it later, saying like, if the Russian people at the time had seen what was in that supermarket, they would have revolted.
Yeah.
Because they were told that capitalism was inefficient and nobody would ever have what. It was crazy. And then he was one of the ones who brought on some of the early reforms that led to the Soviet Union being disbanded.
That's a great insight. Yeah,
it's amazing. And no, Canada's going the other way. Wow.
Yeah, and that is what liberty provides: is abundance. And capitalism is just liberty, freedom of labor. I think is what it is. Your labor belongs to you. And capitalism is the only system based on consent, provides way more options to people. Every other system is based on coercion, and you have very limited options in terms of how you get to spend your time on this planet. So it's still, and I mean,
it just sucks for a lot of people because there's no free rides. There's no free rides, and everything looks like a little bit of hard work. That's that whole thing. It's like, success is one of those devilish bastards. It's elusive because it goes around hiding itself as hard work. It's like, but you'll find it.
That's about the size of it too. And there's something like 3.5 billion people alive today because of capitalist reforms that came in the late 70s. No system has ever produced so much abundance as capitalist has, especially since world markets opened up in the late 70s.
Yeah, well, you take a socialist country and you add markets and you get abundance. You take capitalist countries and you add socialism and you get depletion of resources. It's just it goes in that direction. So let's all move in that right direction, which is towards more free and open markets. I'm dirty 100%. Capitalist, and I preach this all the time. Revasades for 5 says, we heard you like wealth redistribution, so we put some wealth redistribution inside your wealth redistribution. Socialism by any other name. That I haven't heard one of those exhibit pimp my ride memes in a while. But yeah, they sure do like that over here. Revasades adding for another 5 says, this is in response to the crash. What's that smell? Oh, look, the dumpster. It's burning. I wonder if the IMF will do to us what they did to New Zealand in the 80s or to all of those
Greece.
Poor nations. Holy crap.
Greece in the 2010s, like same thing.
That's why sovereign debt is like, well, so debt is slavery, right?
Yeah, I mean, not if you take it on consensually. The problem that I have now is that children don't even consent to be born. They are forced into the world, and we owe it to them to give them a fair shot. But instead, we're handing them the tab for boomer affluence. Effectively, is what is happening with the way we have these pension plans and entitlements programs set up. They're going to be slaves to the systems for their entire lives. So I would say that is slavery because they didn't consent to that. That now their labor is going to go towards supporting boomer retirements, and they never consented to that. That's their time on this planet that's been stolen from them.
And money just represents resources that are out there available, right? And when you borrow, you're borrowing on resources that haven't yet been plucked or picked or pulled out of the ground.
You're stealing from the unborn.
Yeah. Well, not only that, you're stealing from the environment. I think environmentalists should be using this as a huge thing, where it's like you want to slow down consumption of these natural, resources. Well, borrowing infinitely into the future is not slowing that down at all. You're gonna have to pull that out of the ground at some point, and we're probably gonna do it if we get poorer and poorer and poorer, we're gonna do it in less efficient ways all the time. It's not good. That's not gonna be great for the environment. Light YRZ says, great guest. Thank you both. Thanks to you both. Yeah, thanks, you. Bro. Really appreciate that. Revisades all over the chat tonight with another 5 says, the courts have at least 2 tiers, and we have 2 parallel systems between right tribunals and the courts. Also, the RCMP is corrupt. You can't win.
Yeah.
I'm not going to disagree. The tribunals are freaky, though. The tribunals are this
kangaroo courts.
Yeah, you all of the procedures of a normal court are out the window. So you can't face your accused. You don't get to see the evidence that's being used against you.
Yeah, it's Kafkaesque.
It's crazy.
It's Kafkaesque. I can remember saying this. Like I mentioned, the 2023 Woods ban. I went in and did the judicial review there, and I was self-representing. And the argument that the government lawyer, the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission lawyer, was making with respect to standing was that because there was no harm, like the financial harm that I would have incurred if I got fined, or if I owned a business in the woods, then I couldn't stand on my rights alone. There had to be money involved, basically. And I remember saying to the judge at that time, like, I should not have to commit the act of hiking in order to find out if it is legal. Like I said, that is Kafkaesque, as in Stalinist. Like you have to, commit the act, and then if you get charged, that's when you find out that you weren't allowed to do it. We're supposed to have a coherent set of, like, the rule of law. A coherent set of principles that are, easily adhered to. Do as you will, but don't harm another is the guiding principle. As long as you kind of follow that, you shouldn't end up in any trouble with the law. Really, that's not the way it is now. Now it's like you must do things, which is the opposite of freedom. You may put deterrences in place to prevent me from doing harm to another, but when it comes to coercing me to act on behalf of the government, well, that's not freedom anymore. That's that's what Friedrich Hayek said. He said that that's what we mean when we say a free society, is we mean that it's free of coercion. So that's kind of the line that's been crossed since 2020, for sure.
Absolutely. I've got Jilly Peppers, member for 7 months, says, never seen booze be poured out so slowly. That was the Doug Ford. He left a little cap in there, and it was embarrassing. All of his whatever he does in public, like, he's just got to stop doing that. He's just making the whole country look bad.
Even the theatrics are just cringy, right?
Really bad.
It's
really
terrible.
bad. He had ice cream bars the one day because he's trying to promote some Ontario business.
Oh God, I don't know.
Like, he's doing commercials.
It's terrible.
He's doing commercials in the middle of his set. It's crazy. Ravasadi's closing this one out with a couple of more. One for two saying in response to Ford, he slowly pours out his Crown Royal. There you go. Defight you also for 10 says, Defight you jumping in with a 10 says, agree with Jeff. We have it all here in Canada. We could be very wealthy, but instead we choose to sniff glue. Wow. Yeah.
We should be the richest country in the world. There's absolutely no reason for us to live this way. It's terrible. And that was the feeling I got. Like, I was posted to the United States for 4 years in my my military service. I was down at Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida. That's like the NORAD facility, you know, that they called on 9/11, the FAA, and they were like, is this real world or exercise? I worked right there in that compound. Anyway, that was something. Like, I was in Florida, and just the access, the cost of food and fuel, the access to healthcare resources, this kind of thing. I was like, holy smokes, there is absolutely no need for us to suffer so much in Nova Scotia. We don't have to live this way. Like, so, you know, seeing my own country kind of through the looking glass during my time in the United States, I think had a lot to do with what shaped me, you know, into who I am today, and pursuing a lot of these policies, you know, a career in politics and stuff like this, because I'm just like, we are not as free as we like to think we are here in Canada, you know, and I think we can do a hell of a lot better.
Absolutely. I agree with that. Revicades with another 5 says, in response to rights tribunals, no one expects the Spanish Inquisition. Nope.
No.
If they did, it wouldn't be so severe. It's just, it is what it is.
Jurisprudential reckoning, I think, is what's required, but it must be jurisprudential.
Yes, absolutely. But yeah, with the appointees, I don't know, like, what kind of people are going through our schools in Canada and then becoming judges and becoming.
And Slug Ford is another one of the worst offenders, who's funding all this SOGI in the schools and the biomedical transitions at the children's hospitals and stuff. He's, you know, conservative Doug Ford.
You gotta keep laying that out there. There was a big congratulations to Newfoundland for bringing in a conservative government. My knee-jerk reaction is, what kind of conservative? Like,
a progressive conservative. That's like, it's an oxymoronic statement in my book, but that was the official name of the Conservative Party of Canada, you know, in the 90s. And they're not real conservatives. Like, it's like saying a collectivist individualist, a progressive conservative. So it's an oxymoronic term, but even our conservatives in Canada are progressives. That's how far left we are.
Yeah, well, that's what they're conserving. They're conserving the socialism that's been brought to Canada, it seems. Oh, boy. All right, Jeff, thanks so much. Stay on the line. I'm just going to say goodbye to everybody. Thank you all so much for turning out for this one. Impromptu stream. But anytime I'm given the opportunity, I say yes. It's just the way you do it. You got to do it that way. So thanks, everybody, for turning out. And we'll see you all in the next one. Everybody, keep on trucking.